Well, hello and welcome. I'm not sure whether there are many viewers so far. We are going to wait a few minutes just to let newcomers join us before I can start, and for all of you viewers not to miss any point. Sorry for this wait. Once again, welcome to this Google Hangout. So far, we have not enough viewers to start the conversation, so I'm sorry, please wait a few minutes for all other newcomers to join the conversation. I think we have now reached the necessary quorum to start this Google Hangout. So, welcome. Thank you very much for following us throughout the week of this Google session of Hangout. Millesima hosting question and answers about the En Primeur campaign 2014. My name is Antoine Gimbert. I'm export manager here at Millesima, in charge of all English-speaking countries, such as the UK, Ireland, Hong Kong, Singapore, and as well in charge of all supply the US arm in New York. So for which you have already met Denise Barker a few days ago, who thoroughly introduced you to this magnificent campaign. So for those who actually have not heard about us so far, in case you've missed previous introduction or previous conversation, let me introduce you to Millesima. Millesima was founded back in 1983 by Mr. Patrick Bernard, and was aiming to really direct all the resources he had about wine, purchasing wine and supplying wine, but exclusively to private individuals. So we went on and on, opening after France, the first market, various countries across Europe. And after having now opened back in 2006, the US arm, which you already may know, based in New York City, in Manhattan, in the very heart of Manhattan, the various countries such as UK, Ireland, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, we now have opened, and they are actually online, up to 15 different websites that would actually correspond each one to one market. So let's start again, focusing more thoroughly on the En Primeur 2014. So to introduce myself again, I've been working here with Millesima for nearly over 10 years now, in charge of all these markets, and I've been studying law and wine before coming here, and after further position in different states, I'm now in charge of being a wine advisor to each and every private individual willing to buy wine and to actually discuss or just to hear advices or find the perfect wine that will actually match his budget, your palate, or whatever you want, or even, well, why not investment, but that's another story. So Millesima, for those who already know, have an extended portfolio. The basic dominance of the portfolio is actually made by Bordeaux wine. So we actually now count among the 5 biggest buyers of Imprimeur Bordeaux wines. So we are actually extremely strong on these ones, thanks to the strong relationship the Bernard family has built over the years, over the decades, with estate owners and all these chateaux. So not only we're strong of over 9,000 references, growing every year, just implementing new references, not only from Bordeaux, but from the rest of France and the rest of the world. But we as well offer new references, but only after having tasted them thoroughly. We taste each wine several times. We gather a group of tasters. We are all awarded by either the Enology faculty here in Bordeaux or the WSET, for which we have followed different courses. And so we are actually just specialized and dedicated to offering you not only the best wine in the best conditions, but the best service as well, and more important, the best advice, for you can find the wine that would actually please you as you wish. So America is, I would say, not exactly the most recent subsidiary we've opened, because since then we've opened Hong Kong and Singapore, but it remains an extremely important market. So you may have already heard about the power and the strength of this market, which stands among the biggest on earth. Now, with the weakening euro, it's even becoming more important. 2014 is one of a kind as a matter of vintage, because we were really expecting something interesting, which actually, excuse me, so which actually happened, because we've all known and we've already tasted over 2009 and 2010 wines. We're focused on Bordeaux. So 2009, 2010 were the perfect wines. But then they were followed by 3 vintages that were not so laudatory praised, as I might say. So we were hoping for 2014 to happen, and eventually this dreamlike vintage back again, not necessarily the most extraordinary of the past decades, for sure, but extremely interesting, not only as a matter of quality, but as well price ratio, is now released and ready for sale, so which is extremely interesting. So you may have already heard various persons talking about 2014. There are interesting wines from all over the region. Of course, it's rather heterogeneous vintage. There are some great successes, some very good achievements, and some interesting wines. It remains a very good vintage that can, in fact, be compared to several vintages. It's one of a kind. It's just, I would actually look at it just in between 2010 and 2008 as a matter of structure, density, yet surprisingly enough, the color is not that dense at first. We keep on tasting all these wines every day. So nearly every day we taste from 10 to 30, even 50 wines, just to make sure that the wine that we offer you will actually evolve properly according to what we've tasted during the first introduction of these wines during the Imprimeur week, which took place in Bordeaux, here in Bordeaux, by around the 1st of April. So from now on, anyway, please feel free to ask any type of question. So there are several points, key factors when we come to talk about Imprimeurs, 2014 Imprimeurs. So for example, is it still interesting to buy Imprimeur? I would say yes. Then it would depend on what you would like to do with the wine. 2014 is definitely an interesting wine. It has been really expected, as I said, and sought after. And since the beginning, praised and commented as a vintage that is dedicated to drinkers, investors as well, but drinkers, because it offers a wide array of wines that are actually extremely well made and at very interesting prices. Globally speaking, the yields and volumes were actually down, but compared to 2013, it was still interesting. As a matter of fact, the released wines are interesting, still interesting. So the prices were expected to be lower, probably looking at the average and looking at the level of the 2008 average price tag. In the end, some have followed this expectation, some have not, for various reasons. It's actually just extremely interesting to follow all these wines. So it is, back to my question, still extremely interesting to buy en primeur, because as Mr. Glumino said yesterday, you can actually, from the beginning and from the very first stage of the campaign, start and secure your wine. Secure the wine that actually can indeed disappear before the campaign ends because of shortage, because of its rarity, or because everybody was actually seeking for this wine specifically, and therefore everything disappeared. So this is the first reason. The second, could be the first as well, is in fact the price. The price is actually, theoretically, the lower you could get when buying a wine en primeur during its first tranche or its first step. So this is extremely interesting because depending on the vintage, some price would go up along the campaign, but some wouldn't. It's just really depending on comments, critics, eventually awards given by journalists or competitions, and eventually if the, well, it's mathematical in fact. So if the wine is dropping as a matter of rarity, if less wine is on sale, then the price will go up. I see that we have questions. So, have you tasted all the en primeur you are selling? Yes, indeed. We do taste, as I said, daily, all the wines. So we have to know, not only tasting them once, but repeatedly. So every day we keep on tasting all these wines from all these different areas, but not necessarily from Bordeaux, from all the areas, all the wines that we do offer en primeur, and maybe as well Burgundy or the Rhone Valley. So I hope I've answered your question. And how do you handle futures delivery to the US? In fact, it's a way of selling, because all the wines, you have to know it, all these wines are actually bought directly from the estates, and there are no intermediaries. So we buy only wines that were produced and sold to us from the estate. So when you, located in the US, buy a wine to Millesima US, a subsidiary, it's exactly as if you would be buying to us Millesima SA, located in France. So the wine would be within our own allocation. That means the global number of bottles we bought from the estate. The wine, when bottled, is delivered to us in France, and then as soon as we've gathered enough wines and enough wines that would correspond to orders placed and confirmed and paid, then we arrange the shipment, final shipment to the US. So it takes an average of 1.5 to 2 years sometimes, because some do span, as you may know, from 12 to 18 months in the barrels once they're produced, and from Sauternes, some Sauternes do span even more than 2 years. So it is long, but in fact, buying en primeur wines is not only a matter of securing wine, buying at the best price, but as well part of a gamble. You have to rely on what you read, what you heard about it. If you have not had the opportunity of tasting all these wines, it's extremely difficult to say, I want this wine, if you're not aware of its quality, or if you haven't tasted the previous vintages in the past. So this is why we are here. And the best advice I can give is actually to just read as much as you can, if you cannot taste, and do not be afraid of asking anything about these wines. So there's no dull question. So it's just a matter of taste. So the wine needs to be tasted in advance, and this is why we taste the wine several times, in order to be sure that assessing the quality and assessing the maturing ability, the wine will still be nice not only 2 years from the tasting period, after it has spent a maturation period of sometimes nearly 2 years in a barrel, but in the end, after it is delivered to you and then eventually kept in your own cellars for your own private consumption. So another question from Ambika. What were your favorite 2014 wines, and what vintage were they most like? Would you compare them? I have many favorite wines. This is actually a very tricky question. I am quite often asked this type of question. So which is your favorite wine? Especially from 2014, it's tricky. There are several wines. There are glorious appellations. But then again, it's just really a matter of your own taste. It's when you taste a wine, you have to really think about its maturing ability. Whether the wine is dedicated to a long period of aging, if you're buying it at a very expensive price, or medium or at really low price tag. It is. I cannot say really definitely if I do have a favorite. I do have several favorites, and then again, it is extremely difficult to say which ones, because I probably do have right at the moment something like a dozen. So, and from various appellations. So Saint-Julien, Pauillac, Saint-Estèphe, Saint-Émilion as well, and Grave, Pessac-Léognan, Côte de Castillon. There are good wines everywhere, so do not really stick to what only one critic says, but make your own opinion by reading several sources of information. Make your own, ask, taste, and ask again. So what vintage would I compare it to? 2014 is a tricky one because, as I said earlier on, it's in between 2010 as a matter of structure and 2008 as a matter of freshness. So very interesting. But then it is so heterogeneous that there are some epiphenomena that actually in the end would lead an impression of just having, well, awkward results in the end in the tasting. There are many vintages that could be compared to 2014, but there's not one that is actually standing aside and being really the cousin or the brother of 2014. It's just a very interesting vintage that has shown, well, we've already heard about the difficult weather conditions, that boasts a tremendous tannic level, but still the tannins being really silky, melted most of the time. There's no really major sign of extraction. The acidity is extremely high as well. That was actually given by the weather, in fact, especially depending on the area we were focusing on. But very interesting wines with a great maturing ability, very present now while they're young, fresh, and either on the crispy side or the juicy fresh fruit character. But there are some great glorious wines. Another question: you are based in Bordeaux. If I call the store in New York, would I be able to speak with another advisor who has tasted a lot of the wine? Yes, indeed. If you call Bordeaux, you may have already heard or followed the conversation with Denise Barker or Miss Brian Maitland as well. We both will be delighted to answer your queries. So feel free to contact them. If you're located in the US, they're the one to contact. They'll be delighted to answer all your queries. They've tasted. Not only they taste daily, as we do over here, but they actually came down to us to Bordeaux during the Imprimeur week in order to taste all the wines, as many as possible, and that was a long week for them. And it was extremely interesting for them to introduce them. So I think it was the very first Imprimeur tasting session, or the Imprimeur week for some of them, which is tricky because tasting Imprimeur is it's difficult. It's difficult. It's a great pleasure always, but it remains something extremely technical that you actually gain over the years. I have now tasted and have followed. I haven't missed any Imprimeur campaign for the past 15 years. So yes, again, another question. So, what are your favorite wine regions outside of Bordeaux? There are several wine regions. I'm definitely not from Bordeaux, as you may have heard. I'm half Irish and half French, and from the Basque country. So definitely not from Bordeaux. But Bordeaux is, of course, where I work, live, and I really enjoy the wine from Bordeaux. But besides, I love wines from Portuguese, Italy, Spain, and from France, Champagne, Rhone Valley, Burgundy, or Loire Valley, or Provence. There are many wines from all around the world. Back to the 2014 campaign, some wines are offered en primeur, even though they're not from the Bordeaux region. So it may happen, in fact, to some producers from the Rhone Valley and from Burgundy. So this is interesting as well, to secure wines in advance. If you already just are interested and you already know about the wine that you're actually thoroughly looking for. Can you recommend reading sources to learn? Sorry, can you recommend reading sources to learn about the new wines? There are so many sources nowadays, it is impossible to list them all, unfortunately. I wish I could. Actually, reading the mainstream information such as, let's say, Wine Spectator, Decanter, Drinks Business, all these ones will actually provide thorough information. Needless to name all the various critics or journalists that are actually doing a fantastic job, each one tasting really thoroughly and deeply all the wines several times, as we do, and giving them and giving you really nice resumes and detailed information about how the wine would actually behave, how they felt it, and how they think it would actually evolve. It's extremely interesting not to stick to one source, but to drink at several sources. So this is how you actually make your own opinion. So you may not have exactly the same nose as I do, and not have the same palate, same references. It's not a matter of practice, it's just a matter of references, a matter of taste. And thankfully, we all have our own nose, and we're not thus running after the same wine. It would be dramatic. So it is interesting for you to read as much as you can. Internet is actually provides a wide array of sources. It's extremely interesting to just browse through the internet and just check what you can find and what type of information can be gathered in. So then, if you have the opportunity of tasting a wine that would actually, for example, en primeur, if you have the opportunity of tasting a wine and then comparing your own taste, your own impression, your feelings, what you felt, if you liked it, enjoyed it, or not, to what can be read and what can be gathered on the internet. That would be interesting to find your own balance, your own way of finding your own wine. Of course, we can still help you, just asking yourself, what type of one did you particularly enjoy? It would be actually more interesting for you to go for your Pauillac 2014 or a Saint-Emilion. Different blends, different structures, and then within those appellations, there are different wines that actually have succeeded, wines with different typicities, and therefore offering, different results. Very interesting, of course. So this was a question, a very interesting question. Thank you. How are Sauternes this year? Sauternes are great. Thank you for that. In fact, what happened is that 2014, you may have already heard about all these weather conditions were extremely tricky, promising at first, and then with a tricky July, dull month of August. So in the end, everybody was actually was hoping that something would happen, and it did eventually. So Dan benefited from a very late ripening, and at the same time, the freshness during the late summer, and then that went on into the longest on record Indian summer, could actually enable the grape to actually reach the degree of ripeness that are extremely interesting. So great wines, nice, very nice botrytis taste. So that's the noble rot, the kind of mushroomy taste that's extremely kosher with sweetness, honey, and quince. So these flavors, along with a very nice acidity backbone, are actually most of the time present in those Sauternes wines. So another great vintage, another great vintage. Thank you for this question. So what if I don't want to wait for delivery of one of the 2014 vintage? Can you recommend vintages that are ready to drink? There are indeed, Alia, several vintages that are ready to drink. Then again, it all depends on your taste. For example, if you're willing to drink something extremely rapidly or within the next couple of years, I would recommend you something completely different. You would have to either contact me if you're located in Europe, or Brian or Denise if you're located in the US. They will be delighted to really find the wine that would actually match your taste. Wines that are ready for drinking straight away, for example, great vintages at providing as well very interesting prices, such as from Bordeaux 2008, 2004, 2001, and still very, very nice wines from 2003. 2005 is starting to open, but there are some wines that still needs nice and lengthy period of maturing. 2007, interesting still. It was clearly underrated, not interesting, but providing still some very fresh wines, interesting to drink now from now on. Not of an outstanding maturing ability or an incredible density, but very interesting and a decent price ratio as well. 2009 and 10, for all we know, are beautiful magic, but most of them have to be expected for a long while, so be patient for most of them. And 2011 is a very easy wine with very easy vintage with average to low tannins, sometimes a staggering acidity. So some wines are nice and approachable already now, from now on. Some of those do like another couple of years in the cellar to just ease a little. 2012, a bit young, 2013 as well, but 2013 you can still find some interesting wines that are already actually nearly ready for drinking because of the ratio of between tannins and acidity are not sufficient to enable the wine to mature for 2 decades. So do you prefer right or left bank? What's your favorite chateau? Now this question is coming back over and over again. Once again, it's extremely difficult for me to say what is my favorite chateau. I do have several favorite chateaus, but then again it can change from one vintage to another. We really have to stick to what actually was produced according to one vintage. So if you're, let's say, for example, particularly great fan of Domaine de Chevalier from Pessac-Léognan, this remains a great wine. But some vintages may not match your taste. I do not say they're not well made or not, or just disappointing. It's just they always are nice, but would they match your taste or not? It's just a matter of own perception. So I can indicate you a few chateaus that are my favorite, but it will probably not be yours. So we would have to determine which are your favorite chateaus according to what you enjoy. Do you enjoy acidity, tannins? What type of fruit? What are the feelings that you like when you drink wine? What type of fruit do you particularly enjoy? Or even how do you like drinking wine? Do you share it with friends? Or do you drink it on your own? All these elements have got that tremendous importance for you can determine the wine that you like, the chateau, and of course the estate. The vintage. And so again, things that some questions are coming over and over again. So it is extremely interesting. Once I would like to just go back to one important part, is how to choose your own wine. So you can at first primarily determine your choice thanks to the price. Of course, budget is extremely important. So you really have to just think. In the end, if you're waiting for all these wines to be released, determine the global budget. And then from then on, you will have to determine how many wines you would like. Would this budget correspond to one single case, or and sometimes one single bottle, or to a various area or selection of different wines? So this is one really important clue to most of us, in fact. Then many people do stick to comments, critics, and even awards. These are important. As I said earlier, you have to really make sure that and be aware that all these grapes would correspond to a certain taste, a certain taste. So it is, in fact, extremely interesting to just see how you actually would find something that would be either not over acidic, over tannic, over modern against a classic wine. This is interesting. Let me just bounce on this. There is clearly, I would not say an opposition in between the modern wines and classic wines, but when you taste the wines, the type, the structure of the wine can lead the critical comment or coating or information that you read to state the information this is a rather classic or modern. It's just a matter of structure, in fact. Either it has strong tannins, really jammy, deep, thoroughly candied blackberries, for example. That can be in fact considered as modern. But then again, my explanation might not be clear enough. I would have to actually taste the wine with you, and this is actually the best way of knowing what type of wine you would actually particularly enjoy. So price to determine your choice, awards, critics, coatings, your taste, once again, the desire to store. So, for example, if we focus on the 2014 vintage, some wines can age for 2 decades and sometimes even more. Some will not have the same maturing ability because they are not built that way. It's just a matter of how the wine is built. What is the terroir? Does it enable the vine to produce grapes that will be generating in the end after vinification and the high skills of the wine master reach a wine that would age for a decade. But sometimes the wine is not meant to age that long. The structure of consumption has changed over the past years, and if we look back until even the 70s or the early 80s, Bordeaux wines were extremely harsh and difficult to drink before a few decades. So they were meant to be that way. Now, of course, we are all looking forward to everybody to consume more wine and to drink more, so that the rotation of consumption will actually be higher. Therefore, the wine needs to evolve. The technical improvements have then, of course, led to less failures as a matter of production. The wines are actually clearer, nicer, even in their youth. The tannins are more mastered, in fact, and some do appear like a heavy, silky, or like thick velvet. Everything is just depending on the wine and how they're actually meant to be, and they can age, some more than others. This is actually something you have to determine when considering your en première purchase. So, would you like to keep the wine in your cellars, or would you like to drink it within 5 years once it is bottled? It's really up to you. The final thing would be the format. So it is interesting and something that would actually be what you actually have to consider. The format will actually determine as well the maturing ability. We've often heard that the bigger the better, which is not necessarily true. Let's say now if we stick to an average of Magnum or double Magnum, that would be probably the best proportion in between the wine and the air contained in this format to enable the wine to age beautifully. So then again, of course, it's not exactly the same type of consumption in the end if you're hesitating in between a half bottle and a double Magnum. So you have to really determine what would be your first pick. So all these elements have to actually be put in the to be in sight, and you have to really take a close attention to all these elements, for you can decide which wine will actually better match your taste. So, are there other questions? If there is an element that can't be brought, if you ever find yourself offering a tasting session of en primeur wines, please do so. It's extremely interesting. It's a very, very compelling experience. So you'll have to actually focus on not your first pleasure, but on various feelings. You will actually taste a wine even before it is born, because it hasn't benefited from its maturing ability in its mouth. So you have to really focus on various factors, such as acidity, tannins, fruitiness. These, for example, would be the core elements that would actually enable you to assess the quality of the wine, or even if it may or may not benefit from a nice maturing ability. So, globally speaking, right bank, left bank, you have to really focus on each estate individually. Because if some appellations are said to have produced some glorious wines, it would actually depend on the estate. Some have done a better job than others. But globally speaking, there are no major disappointment and no wine that anybody should be ashamed of. 2014 is a great vintage to consider with interest, and we remain, of course, at your disposal should you need further information about those wines, or previous vintages, in fact. So, seeing that we haven't received any further questions, so if you have followed the previous conversation, you may have already had compiled enough information about the weather for this 2014 vintage, and so I may not just go deeper into this topic. If there are any further information or question requested. So it was a great pleasure to talk to you. Once again, thank you very much for your attention, for your question. I remain at your disposal, but so do our wonderful team up in the US, in Manhattan store, that would actually be proud to answer you. I repeat it again, Hortense Bernard, Brian Maryland, and Denise Barker. And feel free to check all the video that we've already produced. So we've broadcasted more than 600 and nearly 700 different videos about producers, how they make their wine, their passion of how they make their wine. And they will be delighted. Well, this would be actually a very nice source of information. And furthermore, all our team would be delighted to answer all your queries. So feel free to contact us. Thank you, and see you soon, eventually, with or without a glass of wine. Thank you very much. Goodbye.